All in all, like, the growth throughout the game for Arch was really encouraging for me. We're going to be fine. Like I said, we got work to do as a team and as an offense. But ultimately, like, I'm getting on the plane knowing we're going to be a good football team. And so, hey, we didn't win tonight. That's the life of a competitor. We went for it in a tough place against a good team.
You know what's fucking crazy? They do the same shit to Bernie. It's really a black people thing. Like, they don't treat Arch like that. I ain't heard not one bad thing about this nigga ever. That just show you how racist these sports analysts is, man. These people hate us for real, gang. Damn.
What happens when college football's golden boy finally steps on the field and looks like just another guy? Arch Manning, the name, the legacy, the supposed next big thing. He's been called the best quarterback prospect since Tim Tebow. Analysts drooled over his footwork, his throws, his pedigree. He hadn't even taken a meaningful snap, and people were already planning his Hall of Fame speech. But then, the moment came. Lights on, cameras rolling. The most anticipated debut in college football, and Arch delivered a 58 QBR, dirt balls, and missed receivers. Still, somehow, the media rushed to defend him like he was the victim of a system that just doesn't appreciate talent early. Meanwhile, another quarterback, with way more on-field success stats, awards, leadership, you name it, can't buy a break. Shedeur Sanders gets picked apart for every incompletion like he insulted someone's grandmother. So now people are asking, is this media coverage about performance? Or is it about preference? Because when one guy skips passes and still gets praised...
But we'll get back on the horse and we'll play good football this season.
All right, so let's put Arch in some numbers there for Sark. 75% of the game, he couldn't complete a meaningful pass. 0 for 5 on throws of 5 yards down the field. Final quarter, he showed some flash, though, completed 3 passes for over 25 yards. You guys know my stance.
And another gets punished for pressure in the pocket. We might be watching 2 different games entirely. But it gets deeper, and what's really fueling the bias might just shock you. Before Arch Manning ever stepped onto a college field, the legend had already been written. The last name alone was enough to book headlines. Manning has become football royalty with Peyton and Eli stacked behind multiple Super Bowl wins, Pro Bowl nods, and enough commercials to fill an entire channel. But Arch? He inherited the crown before showing he could carry the weight. Recruiting sites couldn't get enough. ESPN called him the most polished high school QB in a generation. Scouts compared his mechanics to NFL vets. He was Cubone everywhere, the top-ranked player in his class, and projected as a future #1 overall draft pick. They praised his footwork, pocket presence, bloodline, swag, even his jawline. One analyst literally said, "He's kind of handsome, okay." But here's the thing. All that praise came before any real adversity. Before the snaps, before the mistakes, and most importantly, before the expectations got tested.
Ain't nobody scared no fucking Arch Manning, nigga. That nigga not looking like Peyton. I ain't gonna lie. He ain't even looking like Eli. No, I ain't gonna back though. I do want him to be the GOAT, but I ain't fucking with him today because he with the ops today. But for the rest of the season, I hope he do his thing. We ain't worried about none of that shit. Let's go, State. Let's go.
And then came the game, the one everyone circled on their calendars. Arch Manning facing off against Ohio State, the defending national champions. It was the biggest opening day spectacle Texas football had seen in years. Fans were hyped, analysts were rolling out the red carpet, and the media? They were ready for greatness. But what they got was something else. Arch finished the day 17 for 30, no touchdowns, 170 passing yards, and a QBR that hovered around 58. To put that into perspective, that's Nathan Peterman territory, and that's not an exaggeration. That's a statistical comparison.
If the last name Manning wasn't on the back of his jersey, he wouldn't be the #1 overall pick, the Heisman Trophy winner, the #1 team in the country. It's an enormous amount of pressure for a kid, Joey, that hasn't started a complete season. What did you make out of what you saw from
all that stuff, all the talk before the game, doesn't matter whatsoever. If you're Texas and you're Manning,
He missed wide-open receivers, skipped a ball on the very first pass of the game, and looked completely out of rhythm for much of the day. And yet, the reaction? Oh, the offensive play calling held him back. He wasn't allowed to show what he's really capable of. Let's be real, they had training wheels on him. Excuse after excuse from analysts, fan pages, even former players. Suddenly, Arch wasn't underperforming, he was being misunderstood. The system failed him. The coach held him back. The situation wasn't ideal. That's when people started asking, why is Arch getting the benefit of the doubt before he earns it? Are we watching analysis or a carefully protected PR campaign?
Him to hit. You mentioned the third down, 5-yard pass. It's 3rd and 5. Game changer. You down 7, you got to hit that. He didn't play like we expected him to play in this game, and honestly, he didn't play like a college football quarterback playing for number 1 team in the country. But we expect him to get better than this. It's his first time out. This is a big game on the road. He'll be better.
Because this wasn't a small dip in performance, it was a cold splash of reality. Arch Manning, for the first time, looked average. But the media didn't just stick by him, they tripled down. And that's the part that doesn't sit right with fans. Because when some quarterbacks have to be flawless just to get mentioned, how come others get free passes for falling flat? We've all heard the phrase, numbers don't lie, right? But in the case of Arch Manning, it seems like some folks are going out of their way to ignore the scoreboard entirely. Let's break it down. Arch Manning's debut wasn't just underwhelming, it was statistically bad. He completed 17 passes on 30 attempts. That's barely over 56%. He didn't throw a single touchdown. He barely crossed 170 yards, and his QBR? 58. That's not just below average, that's should we be concerned territory. But somehow, the response was anything but concern.
All right, now, this nigga Arch Manning was a preseason Heisman candidate strictly off his last name. The same shit y'all love him for is the same shit y'all hate Shedeur for. Let me tell you the difference. One white, one black. Arch Manning ain't showed a shit. This nigga got like 38 yards. Like, nigga, this nigga Shedeur was going out there throwing for 500 yards in a game type shit. And y'all still trying to say this nigga not good, he overhyped. Because his last name. Y'all mad his name Sanders and y'all love him because his name Manning. That's fucking crazy.
Instead of analysis, we got apologists. Whole segments were dedicated to why Arch deserves patience, why we need to see the big picture, and why this performance didn't really mean anything. Really? Because when Shedeur Sanders or any other quarterback not wrapped in media bubble wrap has a bad day, the tone is very different. Just check the timelines. Shedeur throws 6 passes in a sloppy preseason game? Suddenly, he's labeled overrated, not ready, and a system QB writing his dad's name. But Arch Manning skipping passes into the dirt? Must be the play calling, must be the O-line, must be anything else. Let's be real. If any other quarterback, especially one with no real college experience, had put up those numbers, media outlets would be airing hour-long breakdowns of what went wrong. They'd be calling it disappointing.
For one, being the true starter versus the backup that's starting is a completely different mindset going into this game. And as you watch Art throughout it, he just looked sped up. Like he never looked like the game was really coming to him. And even some of those dirt balls in the first quarter, that's not characteristic of what you saw in his tape last year. So they're going to have to go back to the drawing board, get him calmed down.
Yeah, and I thought something you said when we were watching it.
They'd use buzzwords like bust potential, performance anxiety, or maybe not as ready as we thought. But when it's Arch, the narrative does a complete 180. The same people who bragged all offseason about how he was generational suddenly act like this was supposed to happen. Like it's just a minor hiccup on his inevitable path to greatness. And again, we're not talking about a guy with 2 or 3 wins under his belt. We're talking about game 1. First impression. Spotlight game. Every camera, every eye, every analyst locked in. This was the moment, and the moment flopped. But instead of facing the music, Arch was shielded. From critique, from accountability, from anything that could interrupt the fantasy. Let's back up and be honest. It's okay for a young quarterback to struggle. It's okay for them to figure things out. The problem starts when we only extend that grace to some and not others. Because a 170-yard, 0 TD performance shouldn't come with he's being held back fluff pieces, especially when Sanders, with a 4 0-yard season and trophies on his shelf, can't even get a fair evaluation. The dialogue isn't matching the data. And fans? Yeah, they're starting to notice. You know it's getting messy when Dan Orlovsky becomes the unofficial spokesperson for Arch Manning's protection squad. The same Dan Orlovsky, known for, let's not forget, unintentionally running out the back of the end zone during a live NFL game, is suddenly the authority on quarterback ceilings and why we just have to be patient with Arch. Here's what he said after Manning's rocky debut. Imagine having a generational talent at quarterback and putting the training wheels on him in his first game. Training wheels? We watched the same game, right? Arch skipped his very first pass into the turf like he was skimming stones on a lake, missed wide-open receivers so often it felt like part of the play design. There was a clip where he literally fell off balance and threw off his back foot with no pressure in sight. But Dan isn't looking at that. He's thinking, why wasn't he given more help? Let's rewind just a bit. Shedeur Sanders played limited snaps in a preseason NFL game, less than 12 dropbacks total. He was pressured on most of them. And immediately after, Dan Orlovsky said he doesn't think Shedeur will see the field at all unless 3 other QBs get hurt. Let that sink in. Arch Manning throws 30 passes in a nationally televised college game, plays poorly, and Dan's excuse is the coaches didn't let him cook. Shedeur Sanders throws 6 NFL preseason passes under duress, and Orlovsky says he should sit behind everyone. Same analyst, same job. Completely different energy. And when people called out the hypocrisy, Dan moved the goalposts again. He talked about how NFL coaches see practice reps and why Shedeur might not be the best option because they see him every day. But when Arch struggles in practice or in game, we're told it's irrelevant, that he just needs time and we shouldn't react too strongly. So, which one is it? Do reps matter? Or does potential win out? Because here's the truth, the same analysts defending Arch have spent the last year undermining Shedeur, not because of his numbers, or work ethic, or tape, but because they've already made up their minds. And honestly, if Shedeur's last name wasn't Sanders, they might have looked harder at his stats and not his family tree. Let's be clear, nobody's saying Arch can't turn things around. This isn't about future potential, it's about current consistency. All we're asking is that the same rules apply to everyone. You can't get on national TV and tell the world one guy deserves 3 years of patience while laughing off another for having a rough series in an NFL warm-up game. Especially when that second guy has already proved more on the field than Arch has ever had a chance to. Say what you want about Shedeur Sanders, but he's done something Arch Manning hasn't even gotten close to yet. He's produced. Let's run the receipts. Shedeur threw for over 0 yards, not once, but twice. He led a program that hadn't sniffed relevance in 5 years to a bowl game and their first 9-win season since 2016. We're talking about a guy who transferred from FCS to FBS, not just made the jump, dominated the jump, and still somehow he's treated like a charity case living off his last name. Meanwhile, Arch Manning has 1 game, 170 yards, no touchdowns, and the media turns into his personal therapy team. But when Shedeur hits a rough patch, analysts can't wait to deliver the "I told you so." One shaky preseason game in the literal first week of his NFL career and suddenly, he's undraftable? A wasted pick? A myth exposed? It's wild how fast the narrative flipped. Before the NFL draft, Dan Orlovsky said, quote, "Shedeur Sanders is a top 5 pick next year." Fast forward 2 months. And Dan's out here saying Shedeur better hope 3 other guys get hurt before he even sniffs the field. What changed? He didn't get arrested. He didn't have some embarrassing off-field scandal. He didn't even play bad football. He just fell to the 5th round. And somehow, in the media's eyes, that erased everything he'd accomplished in college. All the passing records, all the clutch performances, all the leadership. Poof, gone. If the NFL passed him up, he must not be worth talking about. But the funny thing is that exact same grace they strip from Shedeur is handed to Arch Manning in full. Arch plays a forgettable game. Media says, relax, let him develop. He's got the tools. Shedeur gets sacked 3 times behind a 3rd-string line in the NFL preseason. He's not ready, shouldn't even be active. And still, no one dares to ask the obvious question. Why is a QB with actual production, not just hype, being treated like a fluke? This isn't just about disrespect, it's erasure. They're rewriting the rules in real time. Because if Shedeur Sanders with 2 0-yard seasons and national accolades still has to defend his talent, then what does anyone coming up behind him have to look forward to? The message is loud and clear. Play your heart out, but if your last name isn't the right one, don't expect the world to notice. Let's call it what it is. The Manning name is a golden ticket and Arch is cashing it in before he's even proven he knows how to spend it. From the moment Arch committed to play football, the media treated it like a coronation. Remember, this wasn't an NFL draft announcement. It was a high school kid picking a college, and still, ESPN cut into programming to talk about it. That's not hype, that's obsession. And it didn't stop there. While Quinn Ewers, a perfect-rated high school prospect, a transfer from Ohio State, the actual starting quarterback for Texas was preparing for a college football semifinal, and reporters were circling around Arch, a backup freshman. Barely played, barely thrown a pass, but somehow pulling more headlines than the guy actually leading the team. You tell me how that math makes sense. It's not subtle anymore. Arch didn't just walk into Texas, he walked into a situation where his name alone put him as the face of the program, regardless of skill or seniority. The press gave him more coverage than proven starters. His every move was a headline. His future was being mapped out before his first down. And yet, when he stumbled in his debut, they rewrote the whole narrative on the fly. This is just part of the journey. He's got growing pains. Let's be patient, he'll get there. Meanwhile, players like Shedeur, who already got there, are constantly being told their resume doesn't matter. Imagine putting in the work, rewriting school records, transferring divisions, and winning only to be told, yeah, but he's Deion's son. Now flip that. Arch Manning doesn't do much, struggles in his first big game, and still gets treated like royalty just because of who his uncles are. It's not just a double standard, it's a blueprint for bias. If you wear the right name, the game doesn't have to be perfect. The highlights don't need to exist. The eye test becomes a myth. Upside becomes fact. You're allowed to fail, allowed to develop, allowed to grow slowly without being thrown to the wolves. But if you're Shedeur Sanders, you get one shot, one box score, one preseason snap to prove you belong. And if you don't light the sky on fire immediately, that's it. You're just another headline, overhyped, a project benefiting from nepotism. Funny how the nepotism tag flips depending on the family tree. So let's just be honest. Arch isn't just being analyzed, he's being protected. Not because of facts, not performance. Just a last name and a well-crafted media legacy. Support is great, but if a guy who hasn't done much is getting more faith than a guy who's done everything, maybe the system is broken. Or maybe it's working exactly as designed. When things go wrong for Arch Manning, you know who suddenly becomes the villain? The coaches. After his shaky debut against Ohio State, the hot take from pundits wasn't, he played bad. It was, Sarkisian let him down. Seriously. Steve Sarkisian, a former NFL offensive mind, the mastermind behind Alabama's explosive title runs, the guy literally credited as one of the best play callers in college football, suddenly doesn't know how to develop a quarterback? Come on. They said Sark put training wheels on Arch, that he didn't unleash the real magic. They blamed conservative play calling, not missed throws. They questioned scheme, not skips. The storyline shifted so fast it gave fans whiplash. But let's rewind to last year. Shedeur Sanders goes 6 for 10 in a preseason game, most of his dropbacks under pressure, didn't throw a pick, didn't fumble, and suddenly he's not NFL ready, plays scared, isn't impressing coaches in practice. Where were the excuses then? Where was his bad offensive line narrative? Where was the he's still adjusting to a new system breakdown? There were none. In fact, the consensus became, if he was really that good, he'd show it no matter what. So let me get this straight. Arch skips passes like he's playing Foursquare. And we're blaming Sark? But when Shedeur gets shattered in the pocket during an NFL preseason game, it's just his fault? That's not football analysis. That's favoritism wearing a headset. And here's where it gets worse. It's not the first time Sarkisian has been on the hot seat in Texas fan circles. The guy consistently draws criticism for slow offensive starts across multiple seasons. So if that's the case, wouldn't every young quarterback struggle under him at first? Well, guess what? The starter before Arch, Quinn Ewers, dealt with slow openers too. And no one blamed Sark back then. They just said Quinn needed to execute better. Selective memory is a hell of a thing, but the moment Arch sputters, it's the playbook's fault. The coaches, the setup, the lighting in the stadium. Anything but Arch. Meanwhile, Shedeur, despite everything he's had to navigate from transfer politics to media bias to straight-up disrespect, still gets judged more for one bad half in a preseason game than Arch does for an entire start. Where's the patience for him? Where's the space to grow that we automatically give Arch? Let's be real. If you're going to say Shedeur has to compete like everyone else, then hold everyone else to the same standard. Because right now, it looks a lot like the system protects the chosen ones and punishes those who dare to challenge them. And every time someone gaslights you into thinking Arch just needs better play calling, remember, no one said that for Shedeur. At this point, it's hard to ignore. The contrast in coverage between Arch Manning and Shedeur Sanders goes beyond football analysis and right into one of the most powerful forces driving modern sports: narrative control. And few outlets represent that better than Outkick. On the surface, Outkick markets itself as a truth-telling alternative to mainstream sports media. But dig a little deeper, and you'll notice what it actually does: wrap political bias in football commentary and push narratives stacked against black athletes unless they perfectly fit a predetermined mold. So when Joe Thomas, former NFL player, prominent analyst, and frequent Outkick contributor, said the Shedeur Sanders cult lacks nuance compared to Arch Manning fans, it wasn't just a hot take. It was textbook race-coded gaslighting. Listen to the way they framed it. Shedeur's supporters are delusional, a cult with no objectivity. But Arch's defenders? Just thoughtful analysts offering measured critique. Right. Because when Shedeur fans point out legitimate stats, production, and context, they're cultists. But Arch stands circling the wagons after skipped passes are just protecting a generational talent from haters? That's not nuance, that's branding. Outkick and outlets like it have stepped in to become the new voice of common-sense sports fans, the people tired of athletes being humanized, of credibility being earned on the field, and of talent being respected regardless of last name. Their playbook is simple: elevate the familiar, question the unfamiliar, and always make excuses for the ones who look like the traditional image of football IQ. Arch Manning fits that image to perfection: tall, clean-cut, family royalty, built for endorsements. He's a ready-made brand, and they're going to build him until he breaks, then protect him when he does. Shedeur Sanders doesn't fit that image quite as easily. He's self-made, he's flashy, he talks with confidence, he speaks up. His dad is one of the most high-profile and polarizing figures in college football history. And worst of all, he was successful outside the system before he even entered it. Success that can't be chalked up to structure or scouting or some immaculate coaching tree. It came from talent, work. That alone makes people uncomfortable. It's the kind of discomfort that outlets like Outkick package into snarky commentary disguised as real talk. Suddenly, it's not about Arch playing poorly or Shedeur being productive. It's about which player makes them feel more in control of the football narrative. They dismiss Shedeur's career as a byproduct of hype, dismiss his fans as irrational, and then go full PR mode for Arch Manning in the same breath, even when the tape says otherwise. Let's go deeper, though. You can tell the difference in media framing by how they treat confidence. When Arch Manning walks out with swagger, even after a poor game, it's described as poise or mental toughness. When Shedeur dares to flash a watch on the sideline or flex after a big play, he's cocky, showboating, immature. One is leadership. The other? Apparently, it's a problem. And look, it's not just Outkick. This is a pattern across multiple outlets. But what makes them dangerous is how they hide bias behind the shield of anti-mainstream. They want you to believe they're just being honest, just saying what others are too afraid to say. But peel back the layers, and they're just reinforcing the same outdated archetypes we've seen in sports for decades. Shedeur Sanders has flaws like any young quarterback. He needs time to adapt. He hasn't arrived yet. But the thing is, he shouldn't have to be flawless to be respected. And Arch? He should have to do more than exist to be praised. The backlash to this media protectionism isn't coming from nowhere. Fans are watching closely now. They're comparing stats, they're asking questions. They see the subtle double standards, and they're not staying quiet anymore. Social media isn't just a place for hot takes, it's a scoreboard for accountability. Because here's the harsh truth the mainstream doesn't want to admit: the era of unquestioned narrative control is over. You can't call yourself a sports journalist and ignore context. You can't praise potential and trash production. And you definitely can't act like fans are crazy for noticing the blindingly obvious difference in treatment between two high-profile QBs. So when someone like Dan Orlovsky does his 180 on Shedeur and puts Arch on a pedestal after one shaky game, fans aren't shocked anymore, they're just keeping receipts. And the receipts don't lie. Let's make one thing clear: this story was never just about Arch Manning. It's not about tearing him down. It's not about hating on a college kid who had a bad day. And it's definitely not about pitting one quarterback against another like it's some celebrity beef. It's about how media hype, legacy bias, and selective criticism are still running rampant in the world of sports, and why fans are finally done playing along. Because what we just watched with Arch's debut And how the media immediately flexed into protect mode to defend it tells you everything you need to know about how these stories are scripted before reality even has a chance to unfold. And more importantly, it proves that certain athletes are allowed to make mistakes, while others have to be perfect just to get noticed. Let's zoom out. Arch Manning didn't ask for this level of obsession, but the machine around him sure did. He became a product marketed as the second coming of football royalty. Articles were being written about his NFL potential before he took a meaningful college snap. And when reality hit, when he looked average at best and completely off rhythm at worst, the media still pushed the idea that he's just getting started. Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders is literally just getting started. New team, new league, new playbook, new level, and they're already writing him off. It's the exact same pattern we've seen across sports for years. One guy gets elevated for his lineage. The other gets dissected for his every move. And when their performances flip the script, the analysis doesn't follow. That's not just bias, that's protective branding in real time. And we're not pretending Shedeur's flawless. He's made mistakes. He's got tendencies he needs to clean up. He'll have growing pains too, just like any young quarterback. But here's the issue. He doesn't get to have them. The media doesn't grant him the luxury of figuring it out. Every bad pass is a referendum. Every moment of pressure becomes a red flag. And when he speaks with confidence, suddenly, that's a problem. It's the same old code switching the media has pulled for generations. One guy's fiery, another's emotional. One guy's cocky, the other is alpha. One gets protection, the other gets picked apart the second he's not superhuman. And that brings us back to the bigger picture. We're at a turning point in college football. Between NIL, transfer flexibility, and players building their own brands, the control is shifting. For years, the media held the power to shape entire careers. A star was only a star if ESPN said so. A QB only rose up the draft boards if a few analysts gave the green light. Now, players like Shedeur Sanders are doing their own storytelling, posting their own highlights, building their own communities, and fans are tuning in with their own eyes, not just waiting to be spoon-fed analysis from TV panels. That scares the system, because when the narrative starts slipping out of their hands, they double down. That's why they protect guys like Arch. That's why they overcorrect when someone doesn't fit their model. And that's why the second a player like Shedeur outshines the media narrative, they make it personal. But here's the best part. It's not working anymore. Fans are waking up. They're watching the game, tracking the stats, asking questions. They know when someone is being treated unfairly. They recognize shady commentary when they hear it, and they see right through the excuses. Because if we can tear down Shedeur Sanders for one tough preseason showing, then why on earth is Arch Manning getting a standing ovation for skipping passes in college? You can't have it both ways. If you say this is about performance, then judge everyone by the same tape. If you say it's about potential, then explain how one player's proven production still gets dismissed. If you say it's about the future, then stop ignoring the actual work being done in the present. Because this isn't about rooting for one quarterback over another. It's about finally holding the media accountable for the narratives they create and the ones they conveniently protect. So if Arch Manning really is the generational talent they say he is, let him prove it. Let him grow, let him stumble, and let him earn that title like everyone else. But don't tell us one player deserves all the time in the world, while another gets tossed aside for a single imperfection. Because fans? We're watching the whole game, not just the highlight reel.